Hi, I'm Patrick Delahanty, the creator and founder of AnimeCons.com, and I'm here at Otakuthon 2015, where I did a panel on starting and running anime conventions. This is part 2, so if you haven't seen part 1, there should be a link in our show notes down there somewhere. It's probably down there. And go watch part 1 first, and then you can come back here and see part 2, because you kind of want to start at the beginning, you know. And but also in part 2, I do have a link to the more information in the slides that I had in this presentation. So definitely check out the stuff down there if you haven't seen it yet. But enjoy part 2. So budgeting. Your income comes from these places: registration, the dealer's room, Artist Alley and Art Show, and then this is kind of in order of how much money they bring in. And so merchandising, that's the sell of t-shirts and pins or whatever. Program guy advertising, that's not a whole lot. And then sponsorships. I have that at the bottom because it doesn't actually bring in a lot of money. Most of the sponsorships come in the form of, oh, we'll give you DVDs, or we'll provide these prizes for this contest. You're not going to get large sponsorships to pay for your convention. So if you're thinking, oh, well, I'll just talk to Crunchyroll and Viz and Funimation, and they'll end up paying for the con because I'm promoting their stuff. No, there's hundreds of other conventions out there that are promoting their stuff, and they don't fund all of those. So you're at the bottom of that list. Expenses, it's a much longer list. There's facilities, which you need not just function rooms, but room for your staff and guests. The tech equipment, you've got to rent this or buy it, compare that. Your printed material, your registration expenses, because those PayPal fees or Eventbrite fees, those will add up. And that's everybody that registers has to pay that. The guest and staffing expenses, because even though they're staff, you know, you've got to provide them with some incentive. Website registration, the mailbox I had mentioned earlier, office supplies. You need a bunch of pens for your operations staff. That's going to cost money. You need paper. That costs money. Storage space, because between conventions, you're going to acquire a lot of stuff, whether it's those pens, or maybe you have some of your own AV equipment. You get TVs for the video game room, maybe. You got to store that somewhere, and you'll also need to rent the truck to get it back and forth to the convention. And then there's taxes, lawyer expenses, that accountant, all those other incidental expenses. And there's a lot more that I haven't even listed because conventions are expensive. And you'll have to sit down with your treasurer and come up with a budget and decide what you need to spend it on, how much you need to spend, and if you're going to pull in enough money through registration and other means to pay for all this stuff. So programming, before you commit to stuff, you want to talk to your staff and determine what events you can run, because different events have different budgets. If you're doing panels, those are relatively cheap. You just need, I mean, if it's a small enough room, you don't even need a microphone. Hopefully you'll have a projector, because most presentations will use one. So they're relatively inexpensive. A video room is relatively inexpensive. If you're doing a full-fledged masquerade, like Otakuthons, or inviting a World Cosplay Summit, that is a huge expense with all the lights and the screens and the cameras. So maybe your small event, your masquerade, will just have a stage, maybe, or you can just do it on the flat floor if the room's small enough. You have to determine what you can afford and if the payoff is worth the effort. Like, bands are fairly expensive, and if you don't have the function space for a band to play, it's probably not worth paying to bring all the band members and their equipment in to do a performance. So first year or two, you may want to hold off on stuff like bands that could be a big expense. And don't promise too much. Don't promise bands if you're not sure you can have one. Promoting, make sure you keep the convention's website updated. As I mentioned, I've gone to every convention's website, and I see a lot that are horribly out of date. They may have announced guests on Facebook, but they're not mentioned on the website, and As you know, on Facebook, once you post something, it tends to just get buried, especially as newer posts come along. So a month from now, is somebody going to know that you announced this big name guest because it's buried? So keep it on the website so anybody that goes to that website can easily find it. Get the con listed on fancons.com. Now, I run animecons.com and fancons.com, but they're really the same website. There's one database. AnimeCons.com just lists the anime conventions. So if you submit to fancons.com, you've also submitted to animecons.com and animecons.ca and animecons.co.nz and steampunkcons.com and furrycons.com. But there's a lot of other smaller versions of the site that are all powered from the same database. So if you list there, you're listed everywhere. Grab your pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. Even if you don't plan to use, if you don't plan to use Tumblr right away, at least grab it so you have the name. And there's also a very good tool called If This Then That, or IFTTT, IFTTT, where you can have it do, it's named If This, so if it's on Twitter, then that. So if it's on Twitter, then post to Facebook. So it's a handy way to cross-post. I update my podcast, I never go on Tumblr, but it automatically, whenever I post about it on Twitter, posts that over to Tumblr. And so anybody that's following it on Tumblr knows about it. So this can work well for your convention, where you don't necessarily have to post on Tumblr all the time, or Instagram, but you can have it automatically say, okay, you've posted this here, that means post it everywhere. So it's a good time-saving tool. I just mentioned that. Leave flyers at local retailers, ask permission, say, hey, do you have a place where I can leave flyers? I'm starting this new convention, and so comic book shop, if there's an anime store, they're perfect for an anime convention. And hopefully the people that don't find you online will see these flyers and then be able to go to your website. And a lot of times conventions will have a flyer table, so find other conventions in the area. Even if you're doing an AnimeCon, go to a Sci-Fi Con and leave flyers there on their flyer table. And hopefully you'll attract more people. And visit clubs. When we started Anime Boston, we visited every anime club at every college in the Boston area and talked to them about the convention. And not only did we promote it, but we got a lot of staff from this as well. And the people that were just dying for a convention in the area, they wanted to join. And reach out to the local newspapers. If it's far enough out, they may not want to do a story on it, but they may be. Maybe they're interested. Oh, look, there's this group of people starting up this thing. Especially if you can find somebody on the newspaper staff or the TV station that tends to like that sort of thing. If you know, hey, this person did this article on anime before. Let me go find this person. And the best case is they do an article. The worst case is you get listed in the newspaper's event calendar, which is not so bad. Other promotion efforts, you can send out a press release when you get news. And I say when you get news because I'll mention them by name. Anime Expo used to send out a lot of press releases. And I knew they had gotten to an extreme when they sent out a few years ago a press release that they had announced their weapons policy, which really is not news. It was the same weapons policy they had the year before, but they felt that they needed a press release sent out, as if newspapers would carry this. So you want a good idea is when you've announced the dates and locations, send out a press release, let the newspapers know, let Anime News Network know. Guest announcements, especially if you have big guests. Maybe you want to do an individual one, oh, this is a big guest, I'm going to announce them all by themselves, or you could group it to try to make that press release seem even bigger by saying, oh, we've got these 5 guests that we've just announced. And any other notable achievements, we hit record attendance, we passed 10,000 people, or 1,000 people. We've been awarded this, or any other notable achievements. We've raised this much for charity, but make sure there's actually news. Don't just send it out like, hey, we're still happening. And yeah, don't spam them. If they get one every day, they're just going to start ignoring you. I mentioned get listed in the local paper's event section and invite them to attend. Say, hey, you did this article on us, or I contacted you earlier, would you like to come to our event? We're willing to give you a free badge, and we'd love to have you check it out. And if they check it out, you could get an article, or if it's TV, they may bring their cameras, and you might end up on the 6 o'clock news. You know, common mistakes. This is what not to do. I mentioned there's conventions that don't tell people where they are and when they are. You want this on every page of the site. With Google, somebody may search and they find a page on your site, but maybe it's not the front page. Maybe they find your programming page or your guest listing. You want the dates and location to still be there, because if they say, oh, I love this guest, I just searched for the name and I found this webpage, but if you tell them, hey, we're in this town and we're on these dates, they may say, oh, well, that's near me, I can go to that. Don't plagiarize. Over the last few years, there have been several conventions that have popped up that have taken their content, copy and paste from another convention. In one case, it was the dealer's room contract that they had just taken, and you know, if they had asked permission, like, hey, we need a dealer's room contract, we see you have a nice one, would you mind if we used it? And maybe the convention would say yes, maybe they say no, and you can just go to talk to another convention, maybe they'll let you. But if you just take it, that's really not going to go over well, and they'll ask you to not do that anymore. In another case, I saw a convention that started up in New Hampshire. It actually never happened, but they had copied, literally every page on their website was copied from Anime Boston's website, except for their masquerade rules, which Anime Boston hadn't posted yet. So they copied that from ConnectiCon. And so they said, oh, it wasn't supposed to launch yet, it was just temporary. But no, they had gone in and changed the names and everything. They missed a couple, that's how we found it. So yeah, if you want to use something, ask first. Don't announce anything until it's confirmed in writing, well, whether it's the dates and location or a guest. You don't want people to think, oh, they're going to get Steve Bloom, the voice of Spike Spiegel, that's great. And then, oh, well, sorry, he said he couldn't come. Get it confirmed that he's going to be there before you tell people he's going to be there. Update the website. Facebook is great to promote, but keep the website updated. And after the con's over, if you're trying to promote for next year, pull down all the old stuff. Because we don't want to see a guest list for 2015 if your header says 2016. Because then people assume, oh, those guests are coming back. No, you just haven't updated the page, so pull it down. Even if you put, sorry, guests have not been announced for 2016, keep it updated. More mistakes. Promote your convention on another convention's Facebook is really bad form. You might want to ask. If you're on good terms, it shouldn't be a problem, but don't just go post, hey everybody, our con, it's in the same town, but it's 6 months later, come check it out. Ask permission and try to limit those. Maybe one when you announce, one right before your convention, but if you're posting every week, they're going to get really annoyed. Make your website mobile friendly. Most traffic now, a lot of people check out stuff on their phones, and if it looks terrible on a phone, people are going to get frustrated with it. And guidebook. I'm glad Otakuthon is using guidebook, because when you're at the convention, it's so handy. And guidebook does have a free version you can use, so you can at least try it out and get started. And when you get enough people, you'll have to pay for it, but the free version will get you so far. And so for a first-year convention, it's great. Don't procrastinate. If your convention's in a year, you don't want to wait 8 months to start planning it. You need to start immediately. When we started Anime Boston, we started 17 months in advance. And I'm glad we had all that time, because we ended up building it up, and we had a lot of time to promote, and it worked. Our first year, we got 4,000 people. When you set deadlines, hold people to them so that stuff gets done. And if people aren't cutting the mustard, if they're not pulling their weight, don't be afraid to replace them, because if somebody isn't doing their job, it may affect the entire convention. And hopefully you can find somebody that can prevent those problems, because like if you get somebody running the masquerade that really knows nothing about running a masquerade, it's going to be a disaster. And so if they're not doing the work, you need somebody in there that's going to do the work so that it is a good event, because if that's not great, then people are going to be upset. Plan for the worst and hope for the best. So this goes in terms of budgeting too. You kind of want to plan for the lowest number of attendees that you think might show up. So if you think, oh, at minimum we'll get 100 people, but hope for the best. So like, well, we might get 500 people. So you need to budget in case only 100 people show up. Like, okay, we need to pay for this with only 100 people. But you need to plan in case 500 show up. So we need 500 lanyards, 500 program guides, and big rooms big enough to hold enough people. So here's some convention statistics. This is the number of conventions each year, starting in 1990. This is for the US and Canada. So in 1990, there was just one anime convention. It was ACON in Texas. And then that's expanded over the years. And you can see in 1999 to 2000, it jumped up 6. And then 2001 to 2002, it had a huge jump from 29 to 44. And then 2002 to 2003, it jumped up almost 30. 2004 didn't go up too much. Jumped another 30 in 2005. And then 2010 to 2011, another jump of around 40. And so currently in 2015, I know of 253 conventions that have been announced. So when you think about it, if there's 52 weeks in a year, that's roughly 4 per weekend. And it's not actually 4 per weekend. Some weekends have fewer, like US Thanksgiving is a low number of conventions, Christmas, but then other weekends have a ton of conventions. Easter weekend is fairly popular, and but 253, that's a lot. And so when I was saying earlier, there's a convention within driving distance of every major city, yeah, they're spread out too. Over the years I've noticed some trends. New conventions tend to pop up near existing conventions. They may be spike cons, or maybe it's just people who love this convention so much they want it another time that year. I've seen a lot of small or shorter conventions, so they may only run from 11 to 5. They're sort of getting to be more gatherings. And some are Me Too events. They love this convention, like I mentioned, and they want to do their own. I mentioned overly ambitious fans. AnimeCons was the one that plagiarized all their content. That was started by a mother whose daughter couldn't get to a convention. And Tendoku-Con's the one I had mentioned in Philly. It was started by the mother of the girl who couldn't go to Otakon. And they wanted their own con. And sometimes these are corporations trying to leech off the fan base. Wizard World tends to do this. They'll go into a city that has successful comic convention and put their own version. They'll have Wizard World city name, and they'll hope to pull in all the fans and get that money. And some cons have started to run in multiple cities. You've got SakoshiCon, Anime Land. I think actually they might be out of business. They had one last, or I think earlier this year, but Anime Getaway is doing multiple cities. There's one in the southeast US that has like Atlanta Anime Day. There's Anime Getaway, and there's a corporation called Black Materia that's starting a bunch of conventions on the East Coast. So AnimeCons.com and FanCons.com, I created those sites in November of 2003. It changed to AnimeCons.com. I got rid of the hyphen in February 2006. A friend of mine actually had the domain, and he just offered it to me. I launched FanCons.com in January 2012 to expand outside of just anime conventions. And there's currently over 6,000 conventions going back to 1936. Every Worldcon is listed. There's a lot in there. Over 5,500 guests from A For Real to ZZ. Those are both bands. And the membership of the site, there's over 18,000 people that have a forum account, and you can also track conventions you've been to, you can leave a rating. And in January 2009, we started a podcast, AnimeCons TV, that I'm actually recording this for, and may edit this down to an episode. We've done 171 episodes, and we post new ones every Monday. And it's on iTunes, YouTube, and AnimeCons.tv. And so, there's some additional resources. The We Run Conventions Facebook group is good for people that obviously run conventions. It is invite only, and it's for anybody that currently staffs any convention. And We Run AnimeCons is just for anime conventions, and they will verify your membership that you actually are on staff. You have to be at least a department head. You have to supervise other staff to be on there, so it's not just open to every staff member, but department heads. And there's also an exec group, which I can't even see. It's only for convention chairs who have had their convention take place at least once. And there's a lot of secret talk that happens in there, I'm told. But if anybody has any questions, hopefully I've answered a lot of them, but do you have any other questions? Yes?
I'd just like to mention something about, you said the smaller conventions sometimes do in schools.
Yeah.
And there's an advantage to some of the schools is that they get free parking over downtown, for example, in your city. So pulling those in, you get some perks in that sense to get a smaller convention going before going into a bigger convention. Oh yeah, yeah. A smaller convention that's outside a city, whether it's in a school or even a hotel, could have free parking. I've been to plenty that are outside a city that, they get a huge sprawling parking lot and just drive right up. That's great. Yes?
It's in regards to the sponsorship research. Would
Yes.
you recommend that the person in charge of the accounts and the money take care as well as the sponsorships? Because there's this aspect where you need to have someone who looks convincing and professional in some way.
Yeah.
What would you recommend?
When seeking out sponsorships, yeah, you definitely want somebody that is professional, and convincing helps too, because you want to convince them to get a sponsorship. It doesn't necessarily have to be any particular position within your organization. You could have a role just for finding sponsorships, or maybe it's taken on by somebody who does public relations, or it depends on what you want the sponsorships for. If you're just seeking a bunch of DVDs for prizes, maybe the head of programming could do that. But if you're seeking money, maybe the chair should take on that position and say, look, I'm running this convention, and I am reaching out to you to seek stuff. But yeah, chances of actually getting money are slim, especially from any of the anime companies. Maybe there's other resources that would be able to donate, but prize support is mainly what the anime companies will give as sponsorship these days.
And does anybody have another question? Because I have another question.
Okay, good.
When you want to reach out for famous people, who would you recommend collaborating with? Or how would you approach them in the first place when they don't know you?
Yeah, reaching out to guests. You should probably have one person dedicated to contacting the guests, just so that there's not confusion where somebody might get invited twice, or maybe some other staffers doing an unofficial invitation. So I'd recommend one person dedicated to keep track. But how to find them, you could reach out through if they have a Facebook page. Maybe they list an agent. And then there are some agents.
Sorry, no, I know. Go ahead.
There are some agents that actually have websites and will list their clients. And if they list one, there may be others you can grab. Most of these famous people are online, or they may have a website, and it shouldn't be too hard to find contact info. So, all right.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm sorry. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and I'll be hanging back if anybody has any other questions.
Okay, good.
And so that was my panel on starting and running anime conventions. Basically, the one thing you have to remember if you want to start an anime convention is don't start a convention. But, if you do, hopefully this will help you out. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at podcast@animecons.tv or call our voicemail line at 762-ADEQUATE. That's 762-233-7828. And thanks for watching.